Hi everybody, welcome to week 6 of KHS392, Sport Marketing and Fundraising. For this PowerPoint we'll be covering two chapters, Chapter 10 on Promotions and Paid Media, and Chapter 11 on Public Relations. So let's get right to it and start with Chapter 10, dealing with promotion and paid media in sport. There are four key objectives of Chapter 10. It's first to recognize the complexity of the promotion part of the marketing mix. The second is to understand how that part of the marketing mix, promotion, has evolved with media over the past few years and how sponsorship is involved. The third is to identify elements of promotion and the advantages and the disadvantages or limitations of each type of promotion. And finally, to recognize the key characteristics of what makes an effective promotional campaign. One of the first things that we have to do is to define what promotion is. So the definition of promotion is any activity designed to stimulate interest in, awareness of, and purchase of a product. Essentially, it's the methods used to convey the information from an organization about the other elements of the marketing mix. The promotion component communicates all the information about place, about price, and about product. And it's extremely important in terms of positioning the product in the mind of us as consumers. There are several types of promotion. For the purposes of this PowerPoint, we're going to be talking about four. The first is advertising. Advertising is any paid, non-personal, clearly sponsored message conveyed through the media. It's not directed at any one specific individual. And here, when we say sponsored message, it's not in terms of sponsorship as we think in terms of sport marketing, just that it's endorsed by a specific organization. Personal selling, on the other hand, is any face-to-face presentation in which the seller of a product has an opportunity to persuade the consumer to purchase that product. In this case, it moves from very broad to a very personal, directed at a specific individual. The third type of promotion is publicity. And publicity is any form of exposure in the media which is not paid for by the beneficiary or within the beneficiary's control or influence. Meaning that it's any form of exposure in the media, whether it's news or social media, that isn't paid for by that company or organization, and that isn't within the control. That company or organization doesn't control or influence the message. Sales promotion is the fourth type, and it's all the different variety of activities that include displays, maybe trade show setups, sampling at events, coupons, premium items, maybe exhibitions or specific performances. And these are things related to price. And for example, here we have a Foot Locker ad. It's a sales promotion based on price, and it really is just a coupon. Now, the goal of promotion, regardless of which of the four that we are talking about, should ultimately lead to action on the part of the consumer. And in the textbook and many other sources, we talk about the AIDA principle, A-I-D-A. And what AIDA stands for is developing awareness, interest, desire, and then action. So in terms of the first A, through the promotion, whether it's advertising or sales promotion, you're trying to develop knowledge or awareness about that specific product or service. People need to know about it before it goes even further. The second step, the I, is interest. Simply because people know about it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be interested in that particular product. So through promotion, you want to generate interest. The D is desire. Again, just because interest is involved doesn't mean that an individual is really going to desire the product or service. They need to build that desire, and ultimately leading to the last day of action, where generating the awareness, the interest, and desire, the promotion, calls to action of the consumer, where ultimately they're going to purchase or partake in that service. In terms of advertising, it should do the following, and it's very similar to the ADA principle on the previous slide. First, it should create awareness. It should communicate information about the attributes and benefits of that product. Why is it beneficial for people to use that or purchase that product? Potentially, it could develop, change, or maybe enhance an image of a product. Or maybe it associates a brand or product with specific emotions. And finally, just like that ADA principle, it should precipitate behavior. It should create action upon the consumer's perspective. Here you see a graphic representation of the advertising communication system. And on the left-hand side, you see where the source of the advertising comes from. This is the original point of origin of the source. That's the organization that develops the advertising. They develop a message, and that goes to the middle box, which is the receiver, which is us, the audience, or the consumer. And then it goes to the destination, which is really considered the action. So in between the source, the receiver, and the destination is the perception process. So just because an organization develops an advertising campaign and they put it on TV or put it on the radio, doesn't necessarily mean that you and I perceive it the way that it was intended. Maybe we'll perceive it in a different way. And there's different channels, which is the type of media that occurs. Again, it can be social media, television, direct mail, word of mouth, which is, the communication between consumers. But it starts with the source and ends with the receiver and destination, and various perceptions influence that process. Again, there's a number of different mediums or types of media that advertising can use in sport. It can be signage like a billboard or dasher boards in hockey. It can be endorsements by a specific athlete. It can be print media or direct mail. It can be electronic media through social or television advertisements. And it can also include billboard, blimps, bus wraps, light rail wraps, a number of different things that could be considered advertising media. Signage specifically can include both electronic or printed messages or logos that identify that sponsor or that organization. And it can be listed on any number of materials. Now, in terms of signage, it's one of the more important and more visible elements in advertising with sport. If you think about the close proximity of television coverage, looking at this example on the slide of a basketball court, that signage is in the field of vision of the viewer, and that becomes a very important commodity for organizations to attach their brand and put their names on those signs. Now, depending on the sponsor's objectives, depending on the sponsor's reasons for getting involved with that specific organization, that signage can vary from being, a really critical component of a sponsorship contract to being something as an ancillary idea. It depends really on the sponsor's objective. And the impact of the signage is often measured in terms of impressions. So how many people are watching a specific soccer game, and how many times that name of that organization or that logo is visible, and how many people are watching multiplied by the time that it shows up on air, and it's the number of impressions or the number of contact individuals that the signage impacts. In terms of endorsements, the definition is a well-known celebrity athlete that uses his or her fame to help a company sell or enhance an image of the company, product, or brand. And very often, people consider endorsements when the specific athlete endorses a product that's outside of their normal everyday sport or activity. So, for example, Michael Jordan endorsing Hanes, the underwear product. That is outside the realm of Michael Jordan's expertise. It's very different if Michael Jordan was endorsing or using his fame to sell basketballs. Now, when seeking endorsers and when companies decide to choose what endorsers they have for their product, they really strive to find a good fit or a good match between their products and the endorser. When there's a really strange or odd mix between the endorser or that celebrity athlete and the product, it doesn't work as well with us as consumers. We find some sort of issue with that psychologically where there makes no connection and it doesn't work as well as it should. Now, however, brands and organizations are really put to the test and challenge when using celebrity endorsers to ensure that the celebrity conveys the appropriate image. If there's a scandal involved or that celebrity sort of changes their image within the public eye, some of those can really go back and potentially hurt the brand that is using that specific athlete. Now, an interesting figure here from last year, 2016, this figure shows the top endorsement earnings per sport. So on the high end, you have Roger Federer of tennis making about $60 million from endorsement deals, to the low end, where you have Lewis Hamilton, who's from the F1 racing series, making about $4 million. And in between, you have everybody from Peyton Manning to Usain Bolt to Cristiano Ronaldo, and even LeBron James on the higher end with $54 million. Moving on to print media, like magazine spreads, gives the sport marketer or the organization a very high degree of control over the content. They can decide what is shown in that particular promotion. And relatively speaking, they're fairly inexpensive to place these promotions. The flip side of that is that print media can really be ignored quite easily by the target audience. So if any of you think about picking up a magazine and flipping through it, generally speaking, you flip over the advertisements and simply read the content that you are interested in. The challenge then for the marketers is to create print media that really catches the eye. So for example, on the slide, you see some advertisements or some print media promotions from Adidas, which really utilizes the space and the spine of the magazine itself to really catch the attention of the reader's eye. There's any number of print media types. That can include magazines, like on the previous slide, newspapers, the back of schedule cards we often see, like when we pick up a small wallet schedule, they have promotions on it. It could be handouts and brochures, maybe posters, point of purchase displays that you might see in a grocery store or maybe a retail store, and also direct mail. There's a wide variety of print media promotion options that organizations can use. Turning to electronic media, compared to print media, the e-media or electronic media offers a much greater flexibility and creativity level for organizations. They can be very flexible and very creative in what they develop to attract consumer attention and put out their messaging. Now, in terms of electronic media and the category and what it contains, again, a wide variety of strategies, everything from radio to public address systems. And in terms of radio, we can think of the traditional radio that you might listen to in your car. There's streaming radio online like iHeartRadio, and there's various podcasts now, which has really taken the sport marketing world by storm. There's obviously television commercials, there's scoreboard media, scoreboard promotions at the facility themselves. There's LED signage, in terms of dasher boards or around the section divisions within a facility. and public address system announcements, where the public address or speakers in a facility discuss or mention specific sponsors or organizations by name. We can also look at hallmark events as promotions or mega events as a way to promote a specific area or geographic region. So a hallmark event is a major one-time event, typically annually or maybe a reoccurring event like the Olympics every 4 years. And it's limited duration, limited in time. It's developed to enhance the awareness, appeal, and maybe profitability of a specific destination in terms of tourism. So these hallmark events, in terms of promotion, do two following things. It promotes the host organization to the public, and it promotes the sponsors of the event and their products. So if we think about the upcoming Winter Games in Pyeongchang, South Korea is using the Olympic Games to promote their country as a tourism destination. It's promoting it to the world by hosting the event on the history, the culture, and the various attractions that you could visit if you went to South Korea. And it also promotes the sponsors of the event. So in terms of the Olympics, you have Coca-Cola and all of the other sponsors that are official Olympic sponsors. Those hallmark events help to promote their brands within that event in that limited duration of time. Some other key critical components of using hallmark events as promotions. It can create unique hospitality opportunities. So for example, on this slide, you see the picture. That is a representation of a hotel that is being built in South Korea as part of the economic development leading up to the Winter Olympics. It really is sort of a space-age design that promotes the modern thinking of the South Korean culture. It can also promote and add to the growth of a particular sport or sport in general. So again, in South Korea, by hosting the Winter Olympics, the South Korean nation will help promote and grow many of their winter sports specifically for that country. It obviously attracts significant media interest and coverage. You know, in terms of the Olympics, whether it's winter or summer, or maybe the FIFA World Cup, there's huge media outpouring and huge interest in the event. And then you can promote the destination, or for this example, South Korea, as a site not only for future events, not just the Olympics, but for the future, but also for tourism and economic investment. So by hosting the Olympics, South Korea is promoting themselves to businesses around the world that they can come to South Korea and invest and consider tourism within that country. Finally, we come to sales promotions. And sales promotions can either be price discounting, where you're giving somebody a promotion and decreasing the price that they'll have to pay, or potentially a non-price promotion, which doesn't have to do with anything related to the cost of the service or product. It's simply a promotion, maybe like a bobblehead or fireworks displays. However, there are some general recommendations or best practices when using these various sales promotions. First is you have to be careful not to alienate or put aside the season ticket holders. The point of purchasing season ticket holders is that you're getting an overall discount on tickets from buying them in packages. If you provide discounts to the general public on tickets, then really there's no point for buying season tickets, and those potential and current season ticket holders won't see any value and maybe drop their packages. The second is to use sponsors to help cover all the costs of those value-added promotions. But the marketers have to find the promotions that work for all levels of consumers. So if there is a specific sponsor, let's just say Dairy Queen is a sponsor of an ice cream night on a Sunday. Get it? Sunday on a Sunday. Maybe defraying the cost, Dairy Queen provides obviously all the ice cream, but all the packaging and the cups to cover the cost of that promotion. but also recognizing that those promotions have to work at all levels of consumers, everyone from the season ticket holders and the long-term season ticket holders, all the way down to a single game buyer who may or may not ever come back again. So putting that all together, and ultimately at the end of the day, organizations use what's considered multi-channel marketing, where they use several different platforms, several different advertising strategies to boost their value and to impact the overall success and efficiency of their promotional campaign. They'll use social media, they'll use the physical location, they'll use direct mail and television advertisements. They'll use a combination of all these things to help fulfill their objectives. And those objectives can be marketing objectives. Maybe they want to increase the percentage share in a particular industry. Maybe it's revenue objectives. For example, they want to increase their revenue by 3% over a 2-year period. Or maybe it's simply entertainment objectives. By partnering with a specific organization, a company will get an opportunity to get tickets and host events at a club suite or some other type of facility event, and providing and ultimately achieving the objectives for the entertainment portion of an organization's sponsorship. Now let's move on to Chapter 11 of the textbook. And this chapter deals with public relations. The objectives of Chapter 11 are first to understand public relations and its role in the marketing mix, and also to understand its role in positioning the product in the mind of consumers. The second objective is to recognize the importance of effective community relations as it applies to product positioning and creating an image for community members. And then finally, to understand the role, the scope, and the high influence that media has and how the media can alter perceptions. Again, one of the first things that we have to do is to define the topic that we're discussing. So here, the definition of public relations is a much broader, much more integrative and wide expansion definition. It's an interactive marketing communication strategy that seeks to create a variety of media which is designed to convey the organizational philosophies, goals, and objectives to an identified group of publics. And this is done for the purposes of establishing a relationship that's built on comprehension between the two groups, interest, and support among all groups involved. In terms of the operational perspective of public relations, it usually involves some sort of specific publicity plan that's outlined, and it's done in coordination with the overall marketing strategy. Now, this public relations plan and the corresponding marketing strategy are used in order to alter or reinforce perhaps consumer perceptions, attitudes, and maybe the level of awareness. So the goal of public relations is to earn the understanding and acceptance from the public. And in the textbook and several other resources, there's something called the public relations formula. And it essentially means that public relations is made up of both media relations and community relations. And in the next few slides, we'll talk about both media and community relations. Now, the first component of the public relations formula is media relations. And media relations is designed to formulate or perhaps shape a favorable opinion for the organization through the use of mass media. In some cases, the organization has to be reactive and respond to inquiries from mass media. And in some cases, it's proactive, where that media relationship is initiated by the organization rather than some external entity or some external event. Another very important part of media relations is to understand that it's interactive between the organization and the media outlet. And the idea is to develop a mutually beneficial relationship with the media that helps them out, helps them provide stories and information for their side of the job, but it's also to shape a favorable opinion of the organization itself. So it's a very interactive, mutually beneficial relationship for both of the stakeholders. One interesting perspective of media relations is how it's evolved in the digital age and this age of social media. And technology has really changed very quickly the way that sport organizations will use media, whatever form of media we're talking about, and how they've used it to communicate with their consumers. We've seen a much larger growth of social media and the use of, say, Twitter or Facebook to communicate messages. And this has caused a number of real issues for traditional media outlets like radio and television broadcasting. Now, the second half of that public relations formula is community relations. And the idea of community relations is to help the organization achieve its public relations objective. It's related to enhancing the public understanding of the organization, but more importantly, gaining public approval, looking good in the public eye, and also gaining acceptance. Ideally, the ultimate objective of community relations is to lead to public support. There are three very distinct forms of community relations in sports. First are those initiatives that are started or created by specific players, maybe a foundation or a charity fund. The second are those initiatives that are created by teams or institutions. And then finally, those that are initiated by leagues or governing bodies. So for example, the NBA CARE initiative by the National Basketball Association is an example of a community relations function for a professional sport organization. One of the interesting differences between media relations and community relations within the public relations realm of sport is the length of time involved. Media relation objectives are usually fairly short term, whereby the community relationship objectives are usually long term. And that's usually due to the fact that it takes much longer to reach those objectives of humanizing athletes, enhancing other marketing initiatives, corporate philanthropy, and generating goodwill towards that organization. Because those objectives take a much longer time to create, community relations objectives are usually longer term. And again, the media relations objectives are usually short term. Now again, to reinforce what the function of public relations is, it's to provide information and general communication to a variety of stakeholders. That could be consumers, it could be shareholders in a company, it could be the suppliers or vendors, perhaps even the competitors, or maybe even the government agencies that are involved with an organization. And you're providing information and communication in order to shape and enhance the image of that organization, to create community relationships that are positive and favorable, and also to create employee relationships that are valuable from the organization in terms of making employees satisfied with their experience. Not only is public relations used to gain political or popular support from the community, it's sometimes used to recruit and develop business partners, maybe even to launch new products or innovations in the marketplace. Sometimes it's used to generate or collect feedback from the stakeholders, and in some cases, hopefully not, it's to cope with crisis or maybe a scandal involved with a sport organization. There's a number of skills that public relations specialists take on. It's important that they know how to build relationships, obviously communicating with individuals, creating a public relations plan, and then how to connect that plan to the overall marketing strategy, make a pitch or be a good salesperson, managing the story and making sure that the correct information is coming about the organization. In some cases, when they're using proactive strategies, they establish talking points, and in some cases, even managing crises. There's been a long relationship between sport, television, entertainment, and how that impacts sport public relations in the market industry. First, when we talk about the shift in media to sport coverage as entertainment, we can look back and look how sports appeared in prime time and the creation of Monday Night Football. That was a key moment in the history of public relations and television. Networks began to solely devote programming to sports, such as ESPN. Sport media personalities started to take hold and emerge. A good example is Stuart Scott. And there are a number of media outlets that provide public relations to professionals in order to promote athletes, coaches, teams. An example of this would be guests on talk shows, or maybe even hosting a show like Mark Cuban and Shark Tank. Now, with the expansion of mass media and the technology, there's been a much greater attention and demand, scrutiny, criticism, and controversy surrounding sport athletes and sport celebrities. Now, the professionals in the public relations world now play a much greater, significant role in providing legal advice to those sport figures, or maybe even helping those athletes and the organizations that they work for navigate through the diverse media landscape between television, between social media, between instant real-time access of information. PR professionals play a much more important role in the public relations functions of sport. Because of these rapid changes in technology and our simple ease of access to information outlets, PR professionals have a goal to balance all the various media opportunities, but also avoid the pitfalls that the digital or social media can present. We've all seen examples of how athletes or celebrities have either tweeted or made some comment on social media that could be questionable. And PR professionals need to understand how to balance that opportunity to communicate with fans and consumers, but also doing it in a critical and sociably responsible method. That brings us to the end of the material for chapters 10 and 11. And as usual, the next few slides will be dedicated to looking forward towards the rest of the session. So at this point, we need to look ahead to the future. Your marketing plan paper and PowerPoint are due at the end of this week. Please refer to the slides 55 through 57 of the week 3 PowerPoint if you need a refresher. And for week 7, you'll be watching the week 7 PowerPoint, reading chapters 12 and 16, responding to 2 discussion boards with peer responses, and you'll also be taking your final exam, which I'll outline on the next slide. So for the final exam, it will be online and it's located in the Quiz and Final Exam tab, just like the quiz. It will open at noon on Monday during week 7, and you'll have until the end of the day on Friday during week 7 to complete it. You'll have 3 hours to complete the exam, and again, much like the quiz, once you start it, you can't go back, so make sure you have a dedicated time to complete the exam. It will have 65 questions made up of multiple choice, true, false, short answer, and it will look very similar to the quiz that you took already, so you'll be familiar with how it's set up. So we've come to the true end, and I want to thank you for giving me your attention. Remember, you only have 1 week left, so keep up the hard work. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me.